reality, and it's happening very close to where we are at the moment. I'd like to share today with you some of the, just a minute. Okay. I'd like to share what we experience as journalists sometimes. We reflect basically, we not reflect, we are there on the front line receiving comments from people about the way they see migrants. I'm told this is not exclusive to Malta, where I come from. It happens in the UK, it happens in Italy, it happens in several countries. Some people are calling me pro-migrant. I am not pro-migrant, but I believe in human rights. And I believe, as journalists sometimes, we need to get out of our comfort zone and assume the role of activists. It's not a word I feel completely comfortable with, but I think the next few examples will explain why, as journalists, we need to take this situation. We need to adopt this position sometimes. This is not last year's news. This is this morning's newspaper, my newspaper at home. We have broken our own rules today. We brought a picture of a dead baby which was washed ashore in Libya. We don't usually do this, but the situation is so tragic out there that I think people are just not realizing what is really going on. And, you know, we tend to confuse matters. We tend to, the fact that people are fleeing their countries and all that, we tend to confuse with the fact that these people are scroungers, these people are Muslim. So automatically, for the eyes of a lot of us, if he's Muslim, he's a terrorist. Unfortunately, that is the reality we're living in today. Let me just give you a few examples. I'm going to show you today, okay, some of the things we do not upload, but these are all real comments. I swear these are comments we receive on a daily basis. Some of them are uploaded, some are not. Remember the story of the Germanwings pilot recently? This is a story which we said had no terrorism background. The automatic reaction from one of our clever readers, is he a Muslim? Because that's the way we think about it, you know. What are you trying to cover up with your statement? What's happening here? Second story, a blogger is hacked to death in Bangladesh. And automatically, it's once again, it's the migrants' fault. The migrants are infiltrating our society. They are influencing you media, you liberal, pro-illegal immigration, multiculturalism-loving bloggers, as we're called. And we're being blamed for, and automatically it's because we're seeing something different. We are seeing black people, immigrants arrive on boats on our shores, and we don't want them. One way of reacting to it is like this. This is a blog written by my colleague, Ramona, who, love her or hate her, just told her, racist, you're stupid. That, I can see why she did it, but I don't think that is very, that will not derive the results I think we need to. I think the worst thing to do with a lot of people is to create confrontation. And in fact, that elicits comments like, Ramona, I hope one of your children gets engaged to an extra-communitarian, and then please write us your opinion. You know, that is the attack you're going to get. And believe me, these are the acceptable ones. I've seen some of them. I don't think they should be shown in public. A week ago, in the newsroom, we were given a number, a satellite number, of a boat which was in distress between Malta and Libya. My colleague recorded a few of this conversation. I hope it plays, just to explain what's really going on. This is at sea, okay? This is not fiction. Sorry. I hope it works, though.
And now, please help us. The others, give us your help, please, now.
Okay.
We are nearly to die.
Okay.
We don't have food to eat. We don't have water to drink. Please, we are suffering with risk. And please help us, please.
Okay.
Where are you by now, please? We are in hope to see you soon.
Okay, someone's there saying the boat is going down, we have no water, we have no food. That's how dramatic the situation is out there. Instant reactions to this story. I don't think any of you know Maltese. Landa petrolju u tuwom suffarini. You know what that translates to? Get a jerry can, fill it with paraffin, and light a match. It gets better. Left from Libya early this morning, have no food or water, please pull the other one. There are genuine cases, then there are people who are literally taking us for a ride. Pregnant women are in no state to undertake this journey either. They should be incarcerated for placing the lives of their unborn children at risk. These are the comments which were not uploaded. Again, presumably Times of Malta, that's where I work, will open its own refugee center to take care of its events, from phone call to housing. The cynics, why does a woman who claims to be a migrant or refugee and can hardly survive on her own choose to have a baby? You know, so we actually should tell them they shouldn't have babies. This gets better, probably because she gets special attention and a chopper ride to the nearest hospital. It's just a migrant trick. Make sure you are pregnant. Think about the logic behind this. So you get the best service from Europe's welfare state. I see some of you doing this. Believe me, there are worse comments than this. But this is what we have to face every day. And this is when I think, as journalists, we have a role. We need to fight against this. This is too much in my books, okay? Sometimes I write a blog myself. This is, I think, one of the most shocking pictures I've seen last year. This little boy here is a little Syrian boy who was saved from the Lampedusa tragedy in October 2013. He stayed in Malta for a few months, and one day his teacher said, draw us a picture of what you remember, something, an image from your life. And this is what he drew. A helicopter, people dying, corpses, the red boat, important because it was a red boat on which he was riding, going down. And I just try to explain the story behind it. You know, this is a horror. This is a child really being honest about his experiences. For me, this is tragic, this whole story. Again, the misinformation, these are the reactions, these are uploaded to my story. Why should a Syrian have to end up in Malta? Is it possible that he found no safe nation along the way? Turkey, Jordan, Israel, Iran, Saudi, Egypt. Many of these nations are populated by fellow Muslims, are safe to live in, and are much easier to integrate with. Again, it's their problem. It is not our problem. It's not Europe's problem. The fact Syria is far away from Malta and Italy doesn't mean these people should not have a right to get to the nearest safe place. Why am I saying this? I'm sharing the comments with you because I always find that at the end of the thread, there is always an interesting discussion. If we inform, as media, if we inform people to say, look, this is what's really happening, without insulting them, without calling them you're stupid. I might think they're stupid, but I will not say that in public. You will always find somebody who is engaging, and ultimately we need audiences to engage. Okay? So at the end of these comments, then you start seeing comments like this coming up. Someone saying, as a master marine for 40 years, I'm sure these people had no idea what they were letting themselves in for. But the people who put them on these boats and take money from them surely do. And this is what I'm happy to see at the end of the day. You will always get the diatribe. You will always get the hatred. The bottom line is that we are creating a discussion. If I can impact 1 to 2 of the 10 readers who are reading me, that's good enough. And I think that's our job. And just to finish off, if you think this was just exclusive to online, there's a newspaper I received a few months ago addressed to me when we said Somali's radio show approach to migrants. If you can't read, it says, someone wrote, no to African radio station, Down with our parties, long live Marine Le Pen, Matteo Salvini too, only they speak some sense about illegal immigration. So this is the kind of rubbish we have to face with every day. I'll now put in Maeve. Maeve can give us a bit more what's really happening on the ground. Thank you.
Hi everyone, how are you today? Good? I like the fact that this is a two-way conversation, so I think we're hoping to get a lot of questions at the end. We don't just want to talk at you. Just to start, my name is Maeve Patterson. Herman very kindly has promoted me to spokesperson today.
Oh, sorry.
Just to clarify, I actually work at Amnesty International's European Institutions Office in Brussels. I head up the communications team there, working with media such as yourselves in Brussels to work with you guys to help us communicate the priorities that we're working on in Europe, one of them being migration. Today I've got, oh, it's gone. Have we got the picture?
We need the picture again. Okay, it's back.
It's back. So today behind me I've got a picture. I opted not to have a slide with information on myself. I opted not to have a slide with information on Amnesty. I just wanted one picture. The only sort of brand recognition around me I have on today is a yellow jacket, which many of you know is the color of Amnesty. The picture behind me it's a nice picture, right? You see 4 little girls smiling, they all look happy. Those of you who have children probably have a lot of pictures like that in your house. I have a nephew, I have lots of pictures of him smiling around my household, and I think it's really nice. I'm sure you do too. The reason I've got that picture up is because I want to tell you a story. After all, we are all in the business of storytelling here. So I'd like to introduce to you the Wahid girls. On the right-hand side, we have Randa, who is 10 in the photo. At the top, Sherahan, 8. To the left, Nurhan, 6. And in the middle, Christina, 2. In October 2013, Randa, Sherahan, Nurhan, and Christina, along with their parents, Hassan and Manal, decided to take a trip. So their parents paid approximately $4,500 to put them all on a passenger boat to Europe. Sounds quite familiar, I imagine. If any of you have kids, you probably had to pay a lot of money to take them on journeys across oceans or to different places. But this is actually a slightly different story that I'm going to tell you. This picture here of the Wahid family, they're a Syrian family. They escaped Syria when the war broke out and went to Libya. Hassan, their father, was a doctor. He was threatened in Libya, he was beaten up, and he felt he had no choice but to leave. What he did was he tried to get to Egypt, but he found that the border was closed to Syrians. He tried to get a visa for him and his family to Tunisia. It was declined. He tried to get a visa to Malta. Declined. Rejected. So what choice did he have? He did what so many other Syrians are doing today. He decided to get on a boat. So in October 2013, along with approximately 500 other people, the majority of them being Syrian, he boarded not what he thought was going to be a passenger boat, but when he arrived at the dock, he got on a fishing trawler. Hassan was put at the back of the boat along with the elderly because he had a childhood injury, so he was deemed not worthy of being in one of the choice places on the boat and shunted to the back, separated from his family. After a few hours at sea, around 2 a.m. in the morning, a boat came alongside the small fishing trawler. There were armed people on this boat. Hassan, when he told Amnesty International, he said that he believed they were pirates. As many of you will know, when people are getting on these boats to Europe across the Mediterranean, they take all of their possessions with them, so they're prime fodder for pirates to come and take what they can from them. The men with guns started to shoot at the boat. 3 people were injured, and the boat was damaged. I'm not going to tell you the story in my words. I'm going to read an extract from what Hassan told Amnesty International. The water inside the boat started rising, so we used our water pumps, but they broke down. The captain switched the engines off. The high waves were rocking the boat on all sides. We stayed like that until the boat capsized. I was eventually rescued by the Maltese. I didn't know if my wife and children had been rescued. The reality is that Manal, his wife, was. Randa, Sherahan, Nurhan, Christina were never found. They were victims of the October 2013 shipwrecks. As many of you know, there were 2 shipwrecks in October 2013, which resulted in the loss of 500 lives at sea in the Mediterranean. Many of you remember that there was a political outcry. In Brussels, I heard so many different leaders from around Europe talking about how we must absolutely do something to stop this tragedy unfolding in the Mediterranean. But 1.5 years on, as Herman said earlier on, we just saw this weekend a further 400 people lose their lives in the Mediterranean. 1.5 years on, European governments are absolutely failing the people who are in need of their help. It's a tough story that I've told you. I think you can see that I'm quite emotional telling it, and it's a tough reality. But there are 2 things I'd like for you to take away today. One is I would like you to remember this story, remember this photo. I actually have it on my iPhone in case I ever forget why I do this job. This is what we're doing. We're trying to give a voice to these voiceless victims. They're the reality behind the numbers. 100, 200, 300, 400 people dying at sea. These are the people. Secondly, on a more positive note, I want to thank you. I know Herman spoke about how difficult it is to report on the reality of what's happening at sea, how there are lots of negative comments, and that can affect the editorial stance because it affects circulation, it affects numbers. It's a hard topic to write about. I joined Amnesty International 1.5 years ago. I actually joined on the 2nd of October 2013, the day before the first key shipwreck happened off Lampedusa. Since then, I can say that about 85% of the phone calls I get are on migration. Recently, we've been doing approximately 3 interviews a day on this topic. So yes, there are some questionable headlines out there, but overall, you guys are doing a great job. You're reporting on the stories of the people, you're giving the facts, and you're busting the myths. And that's hopefully what Amnesty International can help you do too. Provide the information, as Herman says, from on the ground. So if you need anything from us, please come find me at the end and I can share my details, and we're happy to help. The reality that we're facing in Europe is that as it closes its land borders, as war rages in Syria, in the Middle East, in Africa, people are going to keep on coming. That's the truth. No matter how high Europe builds its fences, no matter how often people like David Cameron and other politicians say, we must stop search and rescue, it's a pull factor. I think we're seeing that that quite simply isn't true. People are going to keep coming. Now, my one fear is, and this is again a challenge for you, and hopefully we can help you, is that as these numbers rise, as we see reports on it, people are going to start to become immune. Just like, I don't have a head for maths. When people say somebody won 10 million euros in the lottery, that makes no sense to me. I don't understand these large numbers. When people talk about 300-400 people losing their lives at sea, we stop seeing the people behind it and we just see the numbers. And I'm slightly worried that this is just going to become the new normal, that people are just going to start looking away because they say, oh, look, there's another migrant boat tragedy. It's the same old story. Well, it's not the same old story because every single one of those people on those boats has their own story. We need you to keep telling the stories behind the numbers, to engage the readers, to help them understand that the people who are getting on these boats are just ordinary people like everybody else who are doing everything to protect their families. We need you to report on the reality on the ground, the fact that nearly 3,500 people lost their lives last year, and this year, if the numbers from last week are correct, already 900 people have lost their lives at sea. And we need you to give a voice to the victims, to give a voice to the voiceless people like Randa, Sherahan, Nurhan, and Christina. Thanks.
Now we have Maria Teresa Sette.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. So I want to briefly introduce you to MOAS. So we saw the images earlier of last year search and rescue operation. MOAS is an NGO that was launched last year. It is based in Malta, and it is the initiative by this initiative of two entrepreneurs who at some point decided that they couldn't just ignore what was happening before their eyes. So they decided to invest part of their money, of their resources, in buying a ship and going out there at sea to save lives. Regina and Christopher Catrambone are the founders of this initiative, which is now has become a proper NGO, an international NGOs. So last year, MOAS, which is the acronym of Migrant Offshore Aid Station, cooperated with Mare Nostrum. It was basically one more asset at disposal of Mare Nostrum, and they managed to save in 60 days 3,000 people. This year, the organization has teamed up with MSF, Doctors Without Borders. We've just launched the press release, which is an important partnership for us. And why it is most important? It is important not only because it's the first NGO that operates as a search and rescue mission in the Mediterranean, but it is important also because it tries to actively engage with the media in order to change the narrative. Last year, because of the lacking of resources, it was a small NGO with a small team. They were not able to have journalists embedded during the mission. All the images, the videos we produced were made by our media team. This year, we decided together with MSF to launch a very important initiative in order to engage directly with the journalists, with the media. We decided, first of all, to have a newsroom on the boat, and we will be providing daily news throughout the mission, and hopefully the news, the human stories that will come out will add something valuable to the debate of immigration, of what happenings in the Mediterranean, other than, as Maeve was saying, the numbers, so the Upton tragedies, the Upton shipwrecks. Especially in Italy, there is this situation where the news about the shipwrecks and the tragedy in the Mediterranean is so normalized that they're really just numbers, and what the media usually does is just reporting the number, the context, the comment of the politician, the comment of the other politicians, but this is it. We don't normally hear the story that Maeve just told us, which are essential to understand and to create empathy with people who actually are trying to find a better life, not to invade or not to come and destroy our welfare system, our societies. So this is what MOAS is going to do together with MSF. Also, we decided that this year, throughout the 6-month mission, we are literally about to start the new search and rescue operation in the Mediterranean. In 2 weeks, we'll be out there, we'll be at sea, and we'll be doing what we done last year, saving lives. MSF, the Doctors Without Borders, will be on the boat to provide primary medical assistance. And we also decided to have journalists embedded throughout the mission. It's interesting because we've been approached by at least 600 international networks and journalists. All of them wants to be on the boat to report, which was interesting for us, and of course we are happy that there is an interest out there. But we decided to select a very, very small team of journalists, and of course, it was difficult because all of them had an amazing background and they're all amazing outlet. But we decided that the first way to try to change the narrative and to encourage journalists to use a different approach when it comes to migration is to select journalists who are specializing in migration and who are actually interested in telling the truth without sensationalism, without the inclination to sensationalize.
Yeah.
Thanks. These tragedies, but just by telling the truth and telling the human stories of the tragedies. So that's what MOAS, MSF, Amnesty are trying to do in terms of change the narrative, engaging with journalists. But at the end of the day, it's up to you. It's up to journalists who are. It's you. The journalists need to understand how and what kind of languages, storytelling approach, a different approach they can use in order to go beyond this narrative and this anti-rhetoric. In Italy, there are some slides I want to show you. We have this, this is Il Giornale, that we're very familiar with this kind of headline. So it's, fermiamo gli immigrati islamici, let's stop the Islamic immigrants, basically, because that's associated, they are associated with terrorists. And
this is the funny, if I may interject, we automatically assume that all immigrants are Islamic and Muslim, whatever. I mean, forgetting most of them, at least in my country, we get from Eritrea. 80% of Eritreans are Catholics. So automatically, with stereotypes, once again, it's all about stereotypes. Sorry to interject there.
No, yeah, absolutely. So this is an extreme example. We are used to this kind of headlines, fortunately, from Il Giornale. But sometimes even some journalists who write about immigration with the best intention can fall into the trap of fueling stereotypes, like using, for example, inaccurate data, vague data, fuel the stereotypes that we are actually invaded. This myth of the invasion that actually is not reflected by the actual data, or using like particular kind of terms like clandestino, it's horrible in Italian, illegal immigrant. It's actually a way to dehumanize people, human beings. But unfortunately, this kind of headlines, this kind of media rhetoric is simply the mirror of the political rhetoric in Italy, which is becoming pretty populist with Matteo Salvini and all other political parties who are very much they're actually committed to portray the migrants as invaders, others, different from us. So they are the ones who bring different cultures, they're invading us. And so I think the journalists, in the light of this context, need to take a stand. We can't simply report the news and report about the numbers and report about the comments. We need to take a stand. This is about human rights. And what journalists need to do at the end of the day is holding institutions accountable and telling the truth. So my question to you is this correct? What do you journalists would like from us, from the NGOs, from Amnesty, from MOAS, how can we help you report immigration in a more ethical way, in a different way?
In a more effective way. Should we open the...
Yeah.
If there are any questions to the three of us, please fire away. Yeah? Sorry, the mic's coming.
I was wondering if I could ask you each an individual question. First of all, from Maria, whether MOAS, of course, we've been following since it launched. It's been fascinating and very interesting that now you're working with MSF. Do you think that this is the future of migrant rescue, that where governments are failing, NGOs will fill the gap? For Herman, on the comments, very interesting. This is something that I face every day in Rome when I'm managing comments, whether it's on websites I work on, or Facebook, on Twitter. Have you thought about turning comments off? Oof. This is something that, of course, you can't do this on your Facebook pages, on your Twitter, but some news organizations that I've worked with have pinpointed migration stories as one where we just shouldn't allow comments because of what happens. And then for Maeve, on the way that you were talking about numbers, often when I get information through 1,000 have arrived, 6,000 have arrived, it's very hard for me to go to editors in Rome and abroad and say, this is an important story to cover. I know that Amnesty in all of its areas has very much focused on telling the individual story. But I was wondering what else Amnesty is doing to help us journalists find new ways of telling this story so that when we go to editors, they're actually interested and they want to publish on it. Okay. Thanks.
Should I start? Yeah. It's an interesting question we have been asked recently pretty often because, of course, it is the first time that's happening. MOAS has pioneered this operation at sea. And now with MSF joining us, of course, it is an interesting question. Do NGOs will step up? And clearly there is a gap. There is a gap, and the institutions at the moment don't seem to be filling this gap anytime soon. So what shall we do? As NGOs, there are NGOs working on the ground in Africa and in Italy and in Europe with migrants on different fronts, on integration. So why not? Why shouldn't NGOs working at sea and rescue people? Clearly, we hope, what we wish is that we will stop tomorrow and work on other issues. But from what it seems at the moment, probably we'll need other NGOs collaborating with MOAS and with MSF and try to sort out this tragedy immediately. This will probably be, IOM said it will probably be the deadliest year for migrants at sea, and this is happening. Probably the arrivals of these days was something that we had expected. Migrants were in Libya. They were probably in Libya throughout the winter. They were probably just waiting for the forecast, the weather, to jump on a boat and come. So,
just to answer your question quickly, should we remove online comments? Extremely tempting. I advocated it at one point. We discussed it internally. But I think if we ban all these comments, stupid comments like that, they will just go elsewhere. They will go on Facebook, they will go on Twitter. We remove a lot of the comments. These comments we actually removed. But there's a lot of rubbish going out there, even to the story, the tragic story of this morning. There are a lot of comments which are really gray area. Should we, shouldn't we? I think the most important thing is to show the true face of what people really think and engage the sensible people who know the subject, to engage with them, to try to sense, sometimes by banning people outright, you're going to end up with the opposite result. And I fear that that will happen, as tempting as it is. Maeve?
Yeah, thanks for your question. It's a tricky one, and I'm not sure we have all of the answers. We were discussing this last night as well, and that was particularly why we wanted to end with that question, to kind of work with you guys to help us get answers. In terms of how I've approached it in Brussels, I mean, we basically decided to implement a proactive strategy. So first of all, I mean, we wanted to kind of raise the brand profile in Brussels amongst the Brussels outlets that we're there to talk on migration. So for any of you who are on my mailing list, I'm sorry, you're probably flooded with an awful lot of press releases on this. We know you're not going to write every single time on it, but just by making sure that you guys understand you can come to us because we have the hard facts, we have the research. We'll be launching a report on the 28th of April that looks at what's happened in the first quarter of 2015 in terms of deaths at sea and looking at where the protection gaps fall within Europe and why these deaths are happening. We've got that research, we've got those stories, we can give them to you, we can put you in touch with actual survivors who can speak so you can have your first-hand accounts rather than taking ours. I know you guys like to break your own stories. So essentially, yeah, we keep pushing and then we look for different hooks, flag those hooks to you. So for example, last September, Commissioner Avramopoulos had his hearing in the European Parliament. We launched a big report around that date to tie in the messages. We'll do similar work when the European migration agenda is announced in May. So keeping on finding the hooks and keeping on giving the stories. So proactive approach, new hooks and new stories. I think that's how we do it.
Can we? That's behind you. Okay. Short comments because we obviously don't have much
I'm
time.
going to be very quick.
Yeah.
My name is Brian Elite. I'm actually I'm not a journalist. I'm a sociologist interested in media discourse. And I've got a question for anybody on the panel, really. You talked a lot about changing the narrative. Now, in the UK where I'm based, one of the problems is that there's a false distinction made between asylum seekers, economic migrants, and refugees. And unfortunately, our inability to manage this in the UK has meant that the right have always said, you've called them one kind of migrant, but they're actually another. So I just want to say, as a sociologist, we have to do a lot of work to change this narrative. But thank you very much for your presentation.
Absolutely. In fact, 2 years ago, let me talk about my news organization, we decided we no longer use the word illegal immigrants unless they're really illegal immigrants. Yeah?
Thank you very much. Helen Derbyshire from Access Info Europe. In fact, just following on from what the gentleman said, we've been doing some work trying to obtain from governments around Europe the data on migrants, on the number of migrants in detention, on how many of them are asylum seekers, on the number of unaccompanied minors in detention. And we're finding it extremely difficult to get the data. We're finding that every country gives us different kinds of data, structured, counted, defined in different ways. This is a huge problem which we're addressing. We'll publish a report on this in a couple of months. But I think that this is one of the problems. Mare, Teresa, you talked about holding governments accountable, but we're not getting the information which permits the distorted discourse which we're getting, which seems to me one of the, that discourse then permits makes more difficult solving the problem because of this huge fear that's being generated. And the numbers that we are getting don't actually necessarily reflect that. And I do think that one of the things that we can do as activists and journalists is try to get the more accurate data out so we can have a fact-based discourse around this.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Excellent point. I will actually add to this that what we MOAS will probably try to do is to make our data public as soon as, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, next.
Hello, I'm Maria. I'm a journalist from Bulgaria. I report on migration and also I'm an activist in my free time. And I have big problems with that sometimes. And I want to ask the journalist here, don't you fear sometimes that because the stories we report on are so emotional? And for example, my last case was of people dying at the border after being pushed back. And we're talking now about seas, but there are very, very severe problems with what happens on the land borders. That's why I would like to address to the NGOs like Amnesty to continue focusing on this on this phenomenon, because it's very disturbing that these deaths are happening with the, I could say, participation of the authorities. And how do you feel yourself? Do you sometimes fear losing objectivity in your journalist work because you are getting more and more emotional of the brutal things that you're witnessing in your daily work?
Completely legitimate question. Yes, I need to remind myself often that I am ultimately a journalist. But when I see a situation, I was there in 2002 when the first big boat arrived in Malta, and there were 280 immigrants crammed on a boat like sardines, and we were helping them out. And in the last 14 years, I've seen the situation go from one of compassion to one of indifference, and the last couple of years, racism. So I think I need to fight that idea out there. Does it get emotional? Yes, sometimes it does, and I need to take a step back. But yes, we need to be careful ultimately, because we are all journalists at the end of the day.
Can I just come back on that very quickly? You know, as journalists, you're there to report the news, and whether these stories are emotional or not, they are actually true stories. This is what's happening to people. So again, going back to what I said, it's for you to report the reality, and the reality is a sad reality.
We're watching, seeing it behind us.
Giovanni De Paola, journalist in Brussels. I have one question for Maeve and one to Herman and Maria Teresa. To Maeve, how do you judge the work of the European Commission so far, and what do you expect from the migration agenda expected in May? And to Herman and Maria Teresa, how would you define an activist journalist? Because a journalist is already supposed to tell the truth. In this case, should be already enough. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, thanks for your question. In terms of the migration agenda that will come out in May, obviously, probably like you, we haven't seen the concrete proposals yet. Commissioner Avramopoulos has spoken about a holistic approach to dealing with migration, to managing migratory flows. What we've seen in the statements and press conferences in Brussels, which you've probably attended often, is there is a huge hole in that holistic approach. There's no reference to search and rescue. There's still time for the Commission to amend that. But ultimately, just moving away from the Commission for a second, I mean, we really need to look at what the European governments are not doing. And that really is Amnesty International, who we're looking to target and make sure the governments collectively work together to address what's happening in the backyard of Europe.
Should journalists be activists? Ideally not. But I think in some situations where we saw the wave of hatred out there, for me it's a matter of human rights. And if there's nobody out there, the majority of people, by the way, majority of our readers are against us. They hate us for doing that. Believe me, our own readers would hate us for doing this. But I'm proud to be part of an organization where we buck the trend if we really believe in it. And if it's in line with your editorial policy, and it's a means of fighting for human rights, then I have no problem being called an activist in certain situations.
You're right, this is just telling the truth, so it's not being activist. In this case, it's really telling the truth. Problem is that when it comes to migration, there's a situation where we are used to this kind of story. So it's a kind of a normalization of this story. The journalists fail to create empathy when it comes to migration. So what is an activist journalist for me is not an activist because it joins the cause of an NGO. It's someone who proactively try to change the storytelling. And I want to mention the example of the BBC, which is the pillar of balanced reporting. A few days ago, they published this amazing report called The Syrian Journey, which is actively basically a game. It was a game. I don't know if we can, probably don't have time to show you. They trying to engage with the reader in order to encourage him to opt different choices. So put yourself in the shoes of a Syrian refugee. What would you do? For this story, the BBC was attacked by the the tabloids, basically, but the Sun, but the Daily Mail, it sparked controversy in the UK because the BBC, the pillar of the balanced journalism, why would they publish an interactive game about the Syrian refugee? That's what I call activist journalism, and I think the migration reporting should go towards the path. Journalists have the role to find new way of storytelling in order to create empathy.
Do we have time for one or two more questions? Okay.
Hi, I'm Tanya from Austria, and in our tabloids and in our large media outlets, the anti-migrant discourse is quite strong. So my question would be, what's the most problematic spins at the moment coming from governments and Brussels, in your point of view?
What's the most problematic?
Spins coming from governments or Brussels or myths.
The most problematic spin?
Yeah.
I think one of the big things that we're working against right now is this notion that, or this argument rather, that if we have search and rescue operations, it will act as a pull factor. There was a lot of discussion around this last year, and ultimately due to a lack of political will, as we all saw, Mare Nostrum ended, and now Triton is being used as an excuse. People are saying, this will actually take over from where Mare Nostrum left off. What we have categorically seen and what we will evidence in our report, in Amnesty International's report on the 28th of April, is that this argument about having search and rescue at sea being a pull factor is absolutely dead in the water completely. The numbers are there. We've seen that last year we had 3,500 people lost their lives at sea. The numbers this year are predicted to rise. So with or without search and rescue, the reality is that people are going to keep coming to Europe. We have to look at the push factors, which are war, conflict, and persecution. And the second push factor, which I think, Maria, you pointed to, is the fact that European countries are sealing off their land borders, so people have no choice but to get on boats.
Okay. Final question? I think that's all. Was that it? Okay. If you need any clarifications, any comments afterwards, we'll be available. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.